Hello everyone, today we talk about historical debates on the internet, which is a topic that I had promised you I would touch since I don't remember when, presumably earlier than 1 year, and the time has finally come, right? And I think it's a very fascinating and interesting topics. I kind of suck at telling stories about this kind of theoretical aspects that, because I would like to make it not necessarily about my own personal experience, but about things that are relatable to you. And this is what I would try to concentrate on today, not to sound more boring than what I probably already am. But I think it's also a problem of it's a historical problem, so it's actually a serious thing. I don't know whether you prefer me to talk more specifically about, I don't know, the ancient world, the Middle Ages, instead of making these videos, but I think they can help, and I think I would like to reflect together with you about certain aspects of our years, of our times, that objectively have changed our lives. I mean, we are here on the internet talking about history, right? If you think about this in historical perspective, in fact, it's something amazing, right? We never had this before. Of course, lots of things changed that enabled us to do this, but it's at the same time something we shouldn't give for granted, and also we should be able to learn from this experience, right? And I'm telling you the truth, that I'm pretty critical towards the how things are going and how history is told in general in popular culture. I always come up with this term popular culture, so this is my alibi to sound kind of authoritative, but obviously that's not the issue. Actually, this problems are very complex and complicated, and I'm not aware about the new frontiers of historical research about these topics. They're a bit in between, sociology, communication. I don't know how to frame them. But I think we can learn a lot from history, not just from, in fact, interacting on the internet, meaning, drawing historical information from the internet, but actually making history, that is, making a research on the internet, which is what we always do. Like, I see here in my YouTube stats that most of my views come from people that actually type something on YouTube and they search for it, right? So these people are evidently searching for something specifically, therefore they are doing their little research, right? Their big or little research, right, on certain issues that eventually they care about for some reason, right? The reasons can be also here enormously ranging, like what is that they're searching for, right? I personally don't have a great bias towards the internet. I don't think we're actually doing something wrong. I think the internet is an enormously precious result. I'm not I'm not so snob to say, oh, okay, the internet suck. The true historian is just the one surrounded by books, physical ones. I mean, and the rest doesn't exist. This is pretty, fortunately, and we can already know it if we know history. An attitude that is going to die, right? Of course, and hopefully we will always have beautiful paper books in our hands. Which is an extraordinary experience that no digital read could ever top by certain standards. But here it's not a matter of lifestyle or nor of of fashion, like some people I objectively think do. Like, there are a lot of people who claim to read actually don't really care about learning more than much. Maybe they do it just for pretending that they are somewhat more educated. I don't know. I confess, for example, I don't read much. Like, I read every day, really a lot. But if you ask me which is the last book I finished to read, because I always study, so technically I take that as reading. But I don't have time basically to read books daily, right? I read many books, many parts of books every day, but I don't have the time to conduct a certain lifestyle. I don't think that's a big deal, right? I don't think a person that doesn't read many books is essentially stupid or ignorant or whatever, because there are other ways to be sharp and critical, and parts of these can be, let's say, attributed, in fact, to interaction with other people who know history, right? You can attend conferences, you can, in fact, even listen to YouTube videos, you can do a lot of things. And one of these things is also entering in groups, right, on somewhere. Today I would like to focus, to concentrate the attention on the only groups basically I ever participated to that were essentially one forum once many years ago. For a very few time, actually. Well, not maybe a very few time in itself, but not having great interaction there in the first place. But especially Facebook groups, right, that are, as far as I know, the largest communities of history debaters, aside from others. Of course, there are many sites of historical stuff sharing, like if you take academia.edu, that is kind of, it's a gold mine for historical articles, but also in there there is not everything. Like, in my opinion, you should of course read a lot of books, right, or at least having them available when you're doing your research, because objectively I couldn't think myself right now, aside from the most obvious fact that I do work with books, but in general, even if it was just for my pleasure, free time, I would need a lot of books to learn a lot of things every once in a while. So I wouldn't like to give the impression that books are not important or that they can be bypassed. But I would like to show you, however, that from certain attitudes, from certain behaviors, that not all that glitters is gold. Let's say, this poor proverb I in this context to say, I don't think, but let's say that in fact this concept is intertwined with many others relatively to even the authoritativeness, let's say, that we attribute to certain sources, whichever they are, in this social networks context, especially. And observing this from Facebook groups specifically about history, which is something I could even go more thoroughly into. Like, we could, I don't know, I won't say we can't spy Facebook groups and see what they write or they do to say that, because I actually know that many of you have come from there, and I have full respect for Facebook groups, even if I don't frequent them anymore, but I used to. And I must say that that helped me immensely to understand a lot of history meant as properly as research, as a method, right? Because I think that without a confrontation with others, without discussion, and without arguments too, you can't properly develop many critical skills, right? And yet, how this happens is somehow kind of a universe on its own, right? I suspect the success of all these groups, specifically on social networks, is the fact that they transmit a particular feeling of not a coziness, I don't know how to say that, but now I will enter in that group and I will start debating this cold winter days, and I will sit there lazily, after, so I can read and participate in this stuff that interests me, and we all pass through that in part. I don't know if you ever related to that. I don't know how many of you actually did this. I personally felt it very distant from my nature, from my personality, because let's say, I've always been attracted by seeing what these interactions are about, but I've never quite felt happy about or particularly interested in participating to them for the sake of it, and especially getting involved into actual debates, because I consider them largely a waste of time. A little or better, yeah, depending on what you have to do. Of course, if you have to do something more important, you will not spend your life on that. But there are people who do, and it's very easy to find it out. I do participate, I think, currently just on one Facebook group that is specifically, very. It's something so strange and peculiar and exceptional in the true etymological sense of the word, that it's difficult to talk about it, because it's not it doesn't even involve me because I participate there in incognito. For example, I don't care about my persona participating there. For example, they don't know I make these videos. The people that I know in real life don't know that I am that person there, nor that this Schwerpunkt is actually me, right? Probably people who listen to me, even in my native tongue, wouldn't recognize me if they heard me speaking here. So I like in many ways to remain hidden behind the scenes, but still observing certain aspects that I like eventually to tell to you and to reflect with you, to together with you about. Naturally, these statements would require all an explanation by themselves, like why do you do it, why, what is the taste of it. Well, fundamentally, the only reason why I participate to that specific Facebook group is that there are people that I esteem very much, that I consider as very competent in certain fields, that are very smart, and that I can interact with. Like if I have a question, or if I simply want to share and to give them food for debate. In fact, that's beautiful, because the potential and all the stuff that I've learned through that it was amazing. Also, Facebook groups are interesting because you are exposed, even if you don't like it all the time, to topics that you maybe it's not just that you wouldn't know anything about otherwise, but that you would not automatically go look to. Like, I don't know, if there is a particular topic, let's assume I don't know much about battleships during World War II. I mean, I like them, I would like to know more, and I promise myself to read the books I have, by the way, the many books I have about battleships one day, but I don't do it. Why? Because I'm doing something else, or because I'm lazy, or because when I have free time, I prefer to read something else about, I don't know, medieval warfare than that. But being exposed daily to that information, however, also I realize that has developed within me some particular sensitivity, a particular receptivity. I don't know if you use this term in English, but let's say that the fact that you are kind of more open-minded, apparently, towards certain topics, because whether you like it or not, you have been acquainted to them, and therefore you know essentially what they are about. This is very important to have a complete picture of the world that, as you know, as regular followers, I advocate much for. Like, I couldn't conceive, especially in a topic like military history, and especially the art of war proper, you must have necessarily a diachronic perspective. You can't sclerotize on just, I don't know, the ancient warfare, modern warfare. You have to expand more broadly, because otherwise you can't properly understand what you're studying in your specific favorite time, let's say. So this is partly one reason. Then I could list, I don't know, psychological reasons. Like another very interesting thing, for example, that happens in Facebook groups is that Facebook is very involves very much, commits very much your persona, right? It's strange. Even if I'm there in incognito, for example, and or I don't care about my name, because maybe I created a fake account there exactly to I don't know, make stupid questions, for example. I realized that over time, when I'm there, I tend to make my account behave in a particular way, like that evidently corresponds to what other people think, in the sense that if I want to earn something from that pool of people, I need to attract, not maybe attracting attention is not a good expression, but let's say I have to make, I don't know, to talk about something meaningful, I have to provide some information to expand the debate, the discussion. So it's not that easy, and that's not so central after all. I used to post every day in this group, like a little story every day that takes me like 5 minutes to prepare, like to show like there is an activity that broadens the debate, and I think I make that amount of difference that serves me to learn in turn a lot of other stuff. Like it's motivational factor as well, like waking up every day and knowing that you have to do something, even if maybe it's not so vital, maybe you could spend that time doing something else, but keeping that pressure to keep you active mentally. But that's very, very, very important, and that's objectively why we need more than just books. We need more than just reading to understand, and we need to study. We need to engage commit our mental resources in a way that normally or tendentially we wouldn't. And what is interesting, in fact, about these Facebook groups is that the average person has a name there, and a face, which is usually the real one, and therefore they don't act just on the base of pure like interest or a kind of a cold machine to just identify some reason. These communities are very instructive because they make you understand sometimes how human mind works when it's left in this fairly not a necessarily abstracted place, but let's say in a place where it's as if it was an arena of thoughts, of communication, in which you can effectively test what's in the mind of people, right? And people generally think in ways that as soon as they're not acquainted with others, will kind of keeping their way. That's why it's so important actually to participate to them. So I'm personally interested in this stuff, and I'm personally interested especially in bettering communication, and at the end of the day making this world kind of a better place, if anything, for myself. Like, I don't think that there is anything wrong in this. Like, I believe everything kind of good we do is because we do it both for ourselves and the others, and especially that everything good that we do for ourselves, that is truly good for ourselves, right? Not just without like cynically or like because we think we want to be better than others or Peter. Actually helps other people as well, right? Why is that we study? Just to be better. Like, I feel philosophically, maybe one day we will make another video explaining about this. Like, I don't feel that. I mean, I actually fear a lot the idea that working in itself is something, first of all, nobilitating. I don't find this myth of the fact that work is something positive for mankind. I don't really think it is true. I mean, working is a mean that we are kind of obliged to use to survive and to better our lives, but what matters is the result of work. It's not really working by itself. Like, working is in part diminishing. It tires you, it makes you feel like, it kind of obliges you to do things you wouldn't do otherwise, right? So I don't give it a negative image either, but I think, meaning either, I would say, but it's still something we should be able to distinguish in form of, because there is also a lot of politicization of certain ideas, in my opinion. To me, the real wealth, the real meaningful things that are produced are those that people do freely, like for free interest. That's why having a passion is very important, because even though you may not maybe survive like or eat or having a house with that, you still, but it's still something that you love doing, which is something amazing if you think about it. Like, learning history, for example, for me is of paramount importance. I do love history, and I do love learning about it. And I realized that learning, however, is not an end to itself. Like, even if I wish I didn't have to mind about others, I realized that the more I do for myself, like Schwerpunkt, I like doing it for myself. But I realized, there are a lot of people saying, oh, well, thank you for talking about this, or like, this is interesting, or I can search stuff I'm interested in here, so thanks. I realized that produces some wealth, objectively, because I'm doing this for free. People are just coming here and see, and they mostly appreciate, And this is also pretty interesting because it's very difficult to not much to be appreciated, but not to have a few criticism relatively to my comment, to the contents in general, and therefore there is some. This is just a banal example of what I'm talking about in terms of how you produce wealth and how you can help the world being a better place. Like, and the consequences are potentially infinite. Like, just like we have seen in von Clausewitz, you can't basically abstract all of this activity outside from all the others that we do. Like, I already told you, there is a guy who messaged me that said, thanks to you, I started studying medieval history at university. Like, and this was amazing to me because by the way, this person was okay. Maybe there is no need to add details, but it was not to be given for granted that this person would choose that, and to me that matters because I realize I change things, and we can all change things, and we all do. We all do. This is another very important part of the story, that we always change reality, even if we don't do anything. But there is a difference, in fact, between doing something and doing nothing, and this is very important. I think the true aim of life is not maybe being happy, but having accomplished something. Because at the end of the day, happiness, first of all, we can't always be happy. That would be pathological. We would probably die if that was the case. But secondly, let's say, it's not even what we want. Because after all, what is being happy anyway? Like, every situation seems to be kind of a nuisance. Like, we always complain. Even if we have it easy, we will complain until something is kind of better. And the point, however, in which there would be kind of a thermic death because everything would be perfect. We would have to do nothing, right? So actually what we do, and even our frustrations, our anxieties, our fears, are important to be, if properly channeled, to help the others and ourselves in the process, and vice versa, to be kind of more conscious about what this whole thing is about, right, in existential terms. And that's where I hate myself when I start talking about this, because it's so, like, straight from what I would have liked to discuss today. And in fact, what I would like to discuss properly is how to deal with debates, and because we all get into some, right? I remember the first time I started using the internet regularly, I was amazed by the degree of conflictuality that there is in here. Like, I stay out of most of places where people debate kind of hot things, and they do want to kill each other as a consequence, etc. And it's pretty interesting in part because actually what we discuss in here are not very light topics, to tell it all. We talk actually about very, very complicated stuff, and sometimes difficult stuff, and massacres and wars and other dramatic things that happen in our politics, in our society. And we could expand on that. Like, I could easily start talking about, I don't know, contemporary history as well. But up to that point, I realized that maybe, albeit useful, it could also be... sometimes there are certain limits, first of all. I could talk about these things, but I have the impression that I wouldn't be, like, satisfactory for the audience, as I am for, I don't know, medieval history, for example. Or at least that maybe what I say about medieval history has some value, and that what I would say about contemporary history maybe not as much, right? And since I point also in quality, and I have some economical reasons in the etymological sense of the word, that is, trying to manage this this thing that I'm trying of YouTube that I'm trying to sort out still after almost 2 years. Um, it's important as well. I mean, it's important for me to say things that make sense, that are researched, and I have also this anxiety of kind of making a video a day so that it can grow faster, and also getting like committing myself more, and keeping myself disciplined in the process. I think this sense of self-discipline is the core of the problem. Like when we have a discussion out here with someone who we don't know, generally it the main problem we have is not really about the fact that we don't know things or we make mistakes or that the other person is rude or stupid. It's mostly about our own self-discipline, and this is largely what happens for everybody, right? So even the people we have a debate or an argument with generally have the same problem, but there are ways to see this, I think, in a deeper sense. Like there is an ethical problem at the base at the same time. Like if we express ourselves, we should have the responsibility of having the responsibility for our statements, of our actions, etc., which is not easy. Like just take, for example, my perspective. I'm talking here every day, saying stuff that potentially everybody could come here and say, this is utter garbage. We hate you. We want to kill you, for example, right? And which would happen. Like I've never met at this point people who were savagely, I don't know, attacking me or something. No, I don't think I'm. Maybe unfortunately my material is too boring or too flat by certain standards, surely not for others, to be attacked, to be a kind of fertile ground for criticism. I personally don't have time to cope with certain amount of criticism. Like I do realize that for example, you should always need an answer. Right, if I say something, I should respond to you, but at one point it will come the day in which I will not be able to do it anymore. And it's kind of sad, because at the beginning I said, okay, I should respond to everybody here with comments, and I realized at one point it will be impossible. It's still manageable, but that will create a problem. Debates. Why are debates important? What is that makes them like even useful, and why are we all about this stuff? Well, essentially we are all trying to learn something. Like our problem is we constantly need like confirmation for something, and validation for certain ideas, certain reliance on a source of information as well that can provide that for us. And once again, there would be a lot to talk about this specifically, but also we don't have time. The problem with debates, though, is that it can evolve into arguments, and many people feel as if there was a general problem with the world, after these experiences. Like, I think we have always been in some form of argument with someone, not just on the internet, not just about historical topics. Let's say in person, maybe it's also easier to talk about certain things. You kind of understand the person that you have in front of you. You can understand better what their mind is. But at the same time, I think media like these, are social networks, are kind of useful as well to analyze applicated thought, right? Because you're not just speaking. Maybe, yeah, I'm speaking here now, but also I'm not speaking with someone in front of me, not literally at least. I'm definitely influenced by the fact that I'm saying something that I will put online. I care about giving the impression, for example, that all this the speech makes sense in general. There are many concerns overall that you can imagine. There are actually not many. I basically just say whatever crosses my mind right now, like, because now my brain is literally saying now what I'm pronouncing, and that is, let them know what you're thinking right now. Yeah, and I say these things because I also would like to make you understand that we all have these problems. Like we we do we all share these experiences, and seemingly we have um, um, the same needs, the same fears, the same curiosities, the same questions, and that's especially from the latter that I think the whole thing starts from. Like we go here not much because we like other people. I don't know about you, like um, um, I think I'm a bit misanthropic in general in terms of social life and whatever, but the I don't get on the internet because I think that I'm doing it for someone. Like, mm, of course, for example, in Schwerpunkt, I do um, care about the fact that I am here for someone who can mm, benefit in some form from things I say. Obviously, from a kind of moral and philosophical point of view, I think it's kind of nice that I decided to dedicate a part of my life to this. Sometimes I have doubts, like I don't know whether I'm doing well, whether the time I'm using is good, like is spent in this way. But it's just for the fact of trying that perhaps this question can be answered, and that especially that we can find a meaning in what we do. I must confess, the Schwerpunkt is a reason for me. Like I do really hope that I can do something positive through this, but at the same time, I don't. I wouldn't say I don't think it's important for me specifically, but I do realize that in fact maybe it's important just for me, and that all of this doesn't make a big difference in the universe, eventually. Anyway. Um, but debates are very fascinating because through them you can train yourself to improve your self confidence and self reliance, right? Um, um, let's say my experience, like for example, how I started to participate to this stuff. I think the first time I participated to a debate on the internet was either on this forum I was talking to you, like before I was talking to you about a Facebook group, but there was a forum before that I started using because of video games, because I liked certain video games that were also themed about history and about military stuff, and I started participating there initially because there were lots of people posting after action reports, like, and I was interested in these stories that were kind of chronicles, like, and there were lots of cool pictures. Like that's where I approached the whole thing from. There were modifications of the video game, so I was very interested because they also had a kind of a historical value, and I began there to start wondering, like, yeah, there was this stuff. Let's find out about it. Like there were new polities and new peoples, new stuff that they began to know because of this. I began to read from the internet. I don't remember where I was taking my information from, but I already had this impression that I could treasure some of it, like for years. And telling the truth, I keep doing it. I paste and copy sometimes certain phrases and certain links. Obviously, I download an enormous amount of stuff, and through other more, let's say, scientific means. At this point, I collected something like 10,000 books. And they're almost all about military history, and therefore I mostly use them, and I mostly care or like them, care or use about and use them if I need like a historical to answer historical problem. But it's not everything. Like the first and most immediate medium I use is obviously the internet. So this easy accessibility towards online information is from one side. I think the greatest fuel for the same internet debate, because as easily as you can get in contact with others, you can find information. Now, many people go on these forums and groups because essentially they want to show off. And I must say that when I was young, consistently younger than now, I felt this need. Like I felt like I needed to to affirm myself, I think, to prove that I was kind of competent, that I had something to say to the world that I also thought was just to say, because there were stereotypes and cliches, and I wanted to dispel them. I wanted to, let's say, also to tell my version of the story, right? Which is what we all care in some way, because I think, in case you didn't notice, I think life is not infinite, right? So there is something about leaving a mark, about, as I was saying before, that maybe the true reason of we can't find in life is really accomplishing something, because we're gonna die anyway. So if we keep all for ourselves, like where's the improvement? Like, what have we lived for, right? We can amaze ourselves. I think the reason of also why I love studying history is that you can learn something every day that you didn't know before. You can be amazed by that, and it's a beautiful accomplishment, because it's not just like a feeling that you can say, like, no, I drink this stuff that I like and therefore I feel good about it. Sensorially speaking. This is something more. This is a sense of empowerment and of it unleashes a lot of positive intentions, and it makes you dream, and makes you wonder, and makes you even more hopeful. I don't know, about that things can improve, and this started for me to take place like very early. Like, I think I had a love for studying that largely preceded any of this internet life. Like, unlike many people of my age, because I was saying before, I actually arrived to use internet every day very, very late in time. So I actually always liked books, and they always gave me the sense of kind of an immortality, like the idea that in such a few time you can learn an amazing amount of stuff. I must confess, the most, like, if I could express a wish, just one to just realize, it wouldn't be to be immortal properly, but to be able to stop time at will. That is, I don't know, maybe if now, and this mostly happens because of pressure. Like, I would stop time just for finishing my thesis, for example, and not about for living more. Like, I know that our destiny is inescapable, right? But reading and learning gives you the illusion in some way that what you learn and what you discover is having lived more, is having lived longer. Like, or also this studying history, for example, is like having this long perspective, but it gives meaning to what you do right now. It gives meaning to the world you know. So you can't be a nihilist if you know history, in my opinion. You can't be skeptical in towards the positive direction you can head towards, right? Instead, like, this is another topic, let's say, but I think these are deep motivations that bring us to even to talk with others about certain things. We have evidently also humanly a sense of belonging to a group, to a society, to the fact that we need perhaps to be part of a group, maybe not just being at the center of attention like it's often done, but rather contributing your own way, right? And doing something that others can recognize you for within this world, so that, when you need help, they will be there for you, they will appreciate you. And this is very important. And learning helps you largely to do this, but it's also very unjust. Telling the truth, the experience you get from this is not comforting overall. Like, you get the sense that there is the possibility of an improvement, but whether people will take, like, will will embrace it or not, will start it or not, is not given to be given for granted. Actually, this is a path that shows you that every decision is never granted. Like you have to, it always costs to take a step further, right? But at the same time, is the only way you can do better than you are now. That you can go to a better place than the one you are now, metaphorically, and that's also what that illusion of for immortality and infinity and the truth probably comes from, because we are seduced by the idea of it more than else. But then taking the steps is much tougher. And life, unfortunately, can bring you can wake you up brutally, and to make you realize that after all, you're pretty limited in many ways, physically, mentally. You don't have really much to leave. It's always much later than you could ever think, and this is a sad and bitter note, but at the same time, it's the same reason why we do this, why we actually participate to a group, and we want to leave a mark. It's because it's as if time was suspended in there, and what you did in it could live on in a way or another. This is a very powerful thought, right? What is, if you think about it, what is that all these ancients were like? We're thinking about glory, for example. Why was glory so important? Well, because it was a miserable world, and this idea that your name could live, not forever, but as long as many people could still remember about you, and help the people who you left in this world after you passed, well, had a meaning, had an importance. And instead, as modern people, we stupidly mistake that for, I don't know, arrogance or presumption, or egomaniacal behaviors. Like, we have a lot to learn from history, and in fact, it's plenty of cliches and of amenities and banalities that we could really avoid, right? There are certain phrases about history, like the only reason for studying history is not repeating its mistakes, or history always repeats itself. History never repeats itself by definition. Like, who is the idiot that thinks that history repeats itself? If it was so, we would have sorted out everything. And to live with this fake security is basically surrendering to further research to understand further what the hell is going on, that is always different from a moment to another. Also, in terms of military stuff, one of the other most idiotic phrases in absolute terms is that history is written by winners. I wonder who is the idiot who came out with this for the first time. Like, history, first of all, is written by historians. And even this side kind of tribalistic idea, that there is a people who basically wiped out and the other survives and changes all history. Like, it doesn't work like that. Just take the major sources of some of the greatest empires where people were maybe even subdued by right. This is insane, and actually it reveals how much we need to debate with history in itself, like how much we have to wrestle with the difficulties that history presents, because such banal statements actually reveal the fact that we don't study history at all, and that there is this kind of subculture and mass of people who pretend to be kind of educated while they're actually not. And their problem with them is not because they haven't reached a satisfactory level that I don't know, I personally can't say look from the above, because I say I'm more educated because I am a historian. No, it's not about that. It's a matter of commitment. Many people just want to show off, saying I know this, look at me, and then not caring much about knowledge in itself, because they fundamentally don't know much about it in itself. They don't know it really exists, because they still haven't met it. They still don't know how large that is, right? And why they are losing time, essentially. So this is a powerful reason that brings you there on Facebook groups, on groups in general, forums, and these groups are pretty large sometimes. I mean, the positive thing about it is usually that you can see a lot of people coming and going, and that makes you reflect also about other stuff. It's like when you're at university and you study year after year after year, and very slowly all the people who had begun with you, like they stopped, either they go away because either they stopped studying or they finished studying or they didn't go through other stuff. And you find yourself still there. And sometimes when these groups, you have the feeling of, I remember, I don't know, 5 years ago where there were those kind of people. Now there aren't anymore, but I'm still here, etc. And I must confess you, though, that Schwerpunkt is most definitely not a prosecution of my experience with Facebook groups or other interaction or debates on the internet, but I decided to start Schwerpunkt at a particular moment in which basically I got tired of staying on those history groups. Like, I thought it had become it had become useless by a certain standards, because I had begun more or less in parallel when I had begun to use the internet, etc., in forums, and I had, timidly kind of posted every once in a while. It was very archaic. I still had to get acquainted with how certain logics worked, and naturally I was, by nature, I think I'm very hot-tempered. I have, I'm very cold on the surface, but inside I'm terrible, like I'm in turmoil, and I'm kind of, I have problems with this. Like, sometimes I have outbursts with mostly people who disrespect me, but I mean in real life. Like, it happens rarely. I never came to actually to fight with someone when I go pretty close to that. And I must say, although it's not really comforting, that the actual reason why it didn't happen at the end, it was that I looked so messed up in that situation that I was not a likely person to be wanting to have business with that problem, and it's been risky because I could have really hurt someone seriously, but I think I have a great sense of of justice, a problem, but not in the sense that I'm just as a person, because I pose myself a lot of problems regarding to this, and I'm constantly challenged by like ethical problems that people wouldn't even care about. But like, I care a lot, like especially when I talk about history now, like about things I say and how I say them, and but not in terms of political correctness that I frankly don't give anything about, because I don't care about political correctness. I care about historical accuracy, which is two wholly different things that have nothing to do with each other. I'm for fair, like I'm for equal rights. I'm for like the idea that we are inherently all alike, but it's essentially why we are all alike, that we are all different at the same time, and we all do different things that have different moral value, right? And therefore, to me, it's a constant struggle to not to make the choice that people find kind of more compromising, but the one that is kind of right. Like, I had problems even in my youth. Like, sometimes in school, I bursted into, like, I began to attack professors, saying that they weren't teaching us anything. It was crazy, like in perspective, but I've always felt this very much. And therefore, when I was on Facebook groups, I didn't behave like that, because such things are very rare and just in real life. But I always felt this sense of injustice, of the fact that the exact answer was missed. That when people made a question, that they were given an answer, the answer was never good enough, right? That we could always do better in a certain sense. That was important to me, and it's still something that drives my historical work, in the sense that, of course, I do realize the fact that we have limits, that we can't deal with history like with truth, but we can still make a great difference when we are in front of, we are to write something, we are to say something, and that will have an impact to people. And I've always also never suffered injustice. Like I could never stand that. If it was something I thought it was right, I couldn't like. And most of the times, Facebook groups in this sense show you that there is a lot of cruelty objectively among humans, and it's normal because humans, as we've seen with von Clausewitz, have this innate sense of enmity and conflictuality, right? And cruelty is something we do every day. Like, think of what you do every day, and come tell me like that there is no cruelty in what you do, that there is no responsibility, that you essentially did good things. Like, there are people, of course, that are perfectly, I mean, the most important thing is probably to be honest. And I mean, from a strictly legalistic point of view, like, I feel very much, as you know, personally, I'm a rationalist in general, kind of an individualist, and also universalist. And therefore, I believe that there are certain laws that should be respected, even if they're very different, like if they're very difficult to actually frame. Like, I believe in rights, but not maybe so much in law proper, for example. As I don't trust, like, I trust science with all myself, but I don't trust scientists, wherever they are, like even historians, like the way they do. Like, I always feel, I never actually spoke about this, I've never been vocal about this on Schwerpunkt, but this is actually what drives me at this point. I mean, realizing that when you hear someone speaking or saying something or proclaiming or teaching, there's always a part of yourself that is kind of wrestling to say, but what is this person doing? It's wrong. Like, it could be said better. That there is something that here this person is essentially lying about, or at least is presenting the matter from a perspective that, to me, for example, is not important, or that maybe, I don't know, it's just driven by some low interest, for example. I don't like, for example, most things that I heard in my universities. Not that I disliked, for example, the education that I received, but I'm overall satisfied. But I'm satisfied just because I live in a real world with a certain politics, with a certain society, and therefore I have to be thankful of the world I live in, because even if it doesn't work pretty well, it's still a great lot, right? But I still feel that you can better this, and we always feel this need, right? So when you debate about history with someone out here, I think that the fundamental point is to be like confident, of course, but always knowing that exactly your confidence is the key to make a conscious analysis, like self-interrogation, like examination. That is are you really doing something good right now? Now, speaking, like, interacting on the internet is also very difficult for another reason, that people don't see each other face to face. They don't see whether they're being ironic or critical, and it's very difficult to remain cold about certain things. Like, you always have the suspicion maybe that you're put in a bad light, because, by the way, having a dialogue, like let's say, dialogue is a big word, because it actually means that you get through the barrier, so you're actually able to communicate freely and going deeply to the point. But let's say this debate is going to be read or seen or heard by other people, right? So this is quite important, because that can have an impact on you. And then you will say, oh, well, you're one of those people who cares about what other people say. Well, why? Are you not? Like, if you're a social being, you, of course, not only do care about, but you should care about what other people think of you, because theoretically there can be enormous problems from statements you make that can produce very unpleasant results and consequences over time. So to me, yes, it's definitely important what other people think, but not in the sense that if there is someone that, for example, disagrees with what I believe in, um, at that point, I care about what this person is thinking about me, in the sense that this person could actually be right, especially if if he's saying something that I didn't know, um, or that I don't understand in the first place. So at that point, the average reaction is either feeling, yeah, the average reaction instinctively and is feeling kind of attacked. Like every time you receive a complaint or criticism, I think the immediate reaction deep inside is always like, what the hell? This is a pain behind. Why is he doing this? I wish he hadn't done that, etc. But then there is a kind of a positive attitude that should spark kind of immediately, or after a while at least, that should make you consider not to justify the person at all, because I don't think that justifying it depends. Like, if you're right, you should be justified. If you're wrong, you shouldn't. But even when you're wrong, you should be understood. Like, it's important to see motivations, right? It's like about people who make wrong things. Like, there are two options. Either you just want to punish them, either you can see why they do that, and you can still punish them, but in a way that is more effective than just brutally punishing them for something you don't even understand, because that person may know something that you don't, right? And you should be careful about it. And I'm not talking about specifically like legal stuff. Like, of course, I don't have I think a pretty strict in terms of criminality would be pretty, especially in terms of public order. If I were like a statesman, I wouldn't tolerate, like a legislator, I wouldn't tolerate certain things. But there is also a way to measure human groups at a point you realize that certain reactions are sparked by maybe something you have done. Like, if I made a video, for example, that sucked or said something terribly wrong, and a lot of people would complain about it and dislike it, especially, since the average is normally good, I would start feeling like maybe in this one I screwed up, right? And I should reconsider not what I, for the sake of it, the content, but just trying to understand and to make kind of a conscious analysis and saying, what is that I've done here? Why is that this created so much problem? Which, from this examination, it could as well emerge that it's good that I did that, and maybe the fact that so much criticism was sparked is actually a positive thing after all. But most of the cases, and I can tell by experience, if a lot of people are saying that you're doing something wrong, well, probably in part they are right, or at least they are saying something that can really help you, because this is not normal from a biological, sociological point of view. That in groups there is a form of self-correction for something that can in fact be damaging overall for the same group. Now, today's societies are very complex, so we can't really see how certain things work, but it seemingly there is a way to bypass this problem. That is, that when there are two alternatives to problems that are equally important for respectively for large groups of people, these bubbles tend to separate one from another and to kind of polarize the debate, and this helps society overall, because it's as if at one point these two sides, these two reasons kind of distinguish themselves at the point you can more easily compare them and judge them and form an opinion about that. So it's a problem of information, it's a problem of knowledge, it's a problem of focusing on what the problem is in the first place, which at the beginning is really not there. Well, this is what happens when you confrontate yourself with people that evidently know things that you don't, that evidently are telling you something you're not happy to hear, but that is actually very precious, because it's telling you, look, there is something that you have done that you can maybe reconsider. At the same time, as I was saying before, this doesn't mean you have to give up. This doesn't mean that you have fundamentally look at every criticism as a proof that you're doing something wrong, because that would be stupid as well. But always to be honest with yourself first and foremost. And I must say that this anxiety of coming there and saying something negative or aggressing or attacking is typical of people who have to affirm themselves really and have low self-esteem. And that's also why I recognize, for example, when I was younger, that this was true of me. Right? It's normal when you're younger, you normally have a lower self-esteem than later. Like it's perfectly normal. It doesn't stem from personal experiences. It stems from actual biological stages that actually need you to fail at some point when you're young, to cope with reality. Because that otherwise, when you're older, you couldn't. You would be ignorant about the world. You wouldn't know how to solve problems in the first place. So it's as if we needed drama in part. We needed to. In fact, there is a beautiful article I remember I've read some time ago. It was an inquiry asking people what they think about debates on the internet, and it seems the majority said, in arguments specifically actually, and the majority said I don't know, it was a negative experience. It made them feel anxious and sad, but and angry sometimes. Like, feeling angry is also perfectly reasonable. You can't, because it's as if you have your own truth and you feel it's being wounded by someone, it's been hurt, damaged by someone, and you feel so angry about it, but you don't have time to put your thoughts together to actually make a reasonable answer, and therefore writing something very stupid that, even if you're right, maybe will put you under bad light. And chances are at that point that if you haven't put your thoughts together right, it's also because you don't actually know much about what you're being criticized as well. So it's very easy to have those forms of reaction. But this inquiry said something very interesting, that basically, in spite of all this negative side of the story, people think that debates should be there, like that they are useful, that there is the sense that looking at even at other people, watching other people fighting in this sense is productive. Like, so they would try to avoid getting into an argument, but they still want drama. They still want arguments among other people to be to see. So I realize at this point that the video is already quite long, so I will not enter into the core of what I wanted to, because also I should be very specific, and I'm not even sure it would be too partial about certain stuff. But I wish I had told you some details, certain prototypes of people you find on the internet, whether there are people, for example, who hate you for apparently no reason, right? There are people who, via the internet, mature an opinion of you that is negative, just by instinct. Like, there are a lot of people that don't like each other, right? And this is also an attitude that normally happens when you're maybe confident about yourself. Like, this happens, for example, where there are people who know more than you, and you can see it from both sides at some point, that inherently don't like what you do. They inherently think that you're sponsoring yourself in a way that they find negative. They don't wish you to do what you do. They want you to bring you down, or to humiliate you, or to put you under a bad light. It's always full of these people, and normally they're very narrow-minded people, because even if I don't like someone, for example, I want to be as fair as possible. I mean, if I think this person is doing something negative or something bad, there are effective ways to let's say, put that person at his place just by criticizing what he says rationally, right? Instead, certain attitudes like, ah, no, you're an idiot, or you're stupid, etc., are very silly in the first place, especially when you are coping with people that evidently know something. There is some jealousy attached as well, right? When you, especially this happens when you are corrected. Sometimes you can see it from the other side that you don't like to having been corrected. You feel this negative pulsion towards this person that has corrected you in front of all the others, and you hate this person. You wish to take revenge and all this stuff, and then you screw up at one point because you attack this person for a comment that you seemed to have. You thought it was said poorly, and then you attack this person harshly, etc. And at that point, it's very unpleasant because that's when the drama occurs and people get wild. And in the moment, it's mortifying because usually it doesn't quite break out like a real fight. When I was on the internet before, maybe there were other forms of control, because like the internet 10 years ago was very different from the one it is now. So before it was more raw, it was kind of wilder. Today, there are means to prevent this. Even different management, different overview, a different environment, a different feeling that is being created also by who uses the sites. I don't know, think about Facebook that has just there was a debate a few years ago about whether to add also the dislike, like on YouTube, like there are like and dislikes, and they decided to not to do it because overall they wanted just to to stimulate this positive appreciation, and then maybe just putting like there is now the little angry face that could mean different things, by the way, not just that you disagree, maybe that you actually agree but you're angry by of the thing that's been posted and something like that. So that is a very interesting experience because it's very fascinating to look at these reactions, these emoticons, and see what people really feel about something. And there are various types of people, and I've always liked on this sites to actually spy or to notice at least the various attitudes also towards one another. You can understand what people kind of don't like each other. They debate in forms and ways that is kind of it's like stinging each other, etc. When the drama breaks out, I think the best thing is to calm down immediately, which is very hard to do. Like when you enter in a debate, you don't really know whether you're gonna come out of there alive. I personally debated, had a very few arguments on the internet. Like it happens sometimes, but I've always been a very sensitive person, so sometimes they became an issue for me. Some years ago, like today, I think I would simply get rid of the problem by either blocking or whatever, and I wouldn't get angry because I don't think it's worth it. Like, I think it's rather frustrating and senseless. Like, there are also ways to channel anger. Like, if you have adrenaline rashes, for example, start making push-ups, right, and then vent in that way. That's what I do sometimes, because I need to, during the day, even sometimes I think about what other people I argued with in my life, and just to have adrenaline rashes and warming up for doing push-ups. That is basically the only physical activity I make at this point. And I you can do this, but over time I can't think of the last time I got into a serious argument with someone. Of course, disagreements are different because you can't disagree, of course, with someone at the point you leave each other like without full trust towards it or full respect towards each other, but you don't really enter into a fight proper. But you can always sense that doesn't matter how correct you are, which you can't be 100%, but there's always going to be something wrong either that you say or that you do, and that especially also other people are not going to understand. Misunderstanding is very important in these situations as well. Well, another extraordinary thing you can see on Facebook groups, for example, is the degree of misunderstanding, like saying something, posting something, and people really not getting what the whole thing is about, like what the deeper meaning is. In fact, there are just, uh, you know, now we could open enormous parentheses. For example, there are people who, like, a great deal of knowledge and communication is about making an effect. Like, even speaking language is very important, of course. You can express kind of the you have to put a bit of aggressiveness into it. Like when you're debating, you can't use too many conditionals. You can't say things like maybe, whatever. You should always be firm, like incisive, and saying, this is it, right? And you should look at that in insight, like in perspective, and realizing how it sounds as well. And a very important thing is, before you write a message, you make an answer, you should try to picture how it would look like, even just graphically. Like make a private post and write on it the answer and see what it looks like from the perspective who's gonna read. Like, it can help you a lot, right? It's something, for example, never apostrophate people in weird ways. Do not stress things like expressions like you said your, because it sounds like a bit of an accusation that people generally don't like to take happily, and not even patronizing. For example, never say things like, I'm so happy that you brought this up, because I was about, I don't know, I can't make an example, but let's say you shouldn't be too condescending. You should say what you know and what you think it matters, but without addressing too much personal issues. That's a great tip. It's a great advice, is saying, and of course, even providing information should be clever. You can't come up by dictating a law to sound like this is like this point, like, and you should try to be polite. For example, if there is something I can't tolerate, I mean, you can let's take Schwerpunkt. You know that my criticism policies are very simple. Everybody here is allowed to write, say, this is wrong, this is false, I disagree, whatever, and you know that I actually accept that. If I make a mistake, like I often do, just what it was the other day, it was a comment on a video that I had last year, was a mistake of a date, and what can you say about it? Of course, I realized it was a mistake and said, true, that, thanks. Like, that's a healthy way to act. But for example, if that person was very linear, very objective, very cold about it, you didn't intend any further criticism. Like, I don't know how also you take criticism, because I suppose that this varies among people. But for example, there are people who said right things under my comments, but they said it. First of all, let's say this: that it had an astonishing low amount of criticism on Schwerpunkt, by which I'm amazed, and I don't attribute it much maybe to my explanatory skills or my fairness, because I don't think I'm all this much in this regard, because I get preachy and annoying and rambly sometimes. So it's obvious that someone, I would think actually, someone would come here and say. Instead, I must say that there is not much of a criticism. I don't know whether it's because they fear that I could strike back or something. I don't know, but I frankly don't understand where you find some criticism that I had received an astonishingly low amount of, when that however is very, very impolite and rude, like saying, using words like, this is garbage or whatever. Even if you were right, what makes you think that I'm putting up, like, I'm letting you write in there? That's a problem, right? It's also a matter of expectation? What do you think to do? And the impression you get most of the times is that this person is not really criticizing because you um, because this person is concerned about improving your content. I mean, maybe in part it is, but then why the need of offense? Like that is strange, like to me, because if you really want to help someone, you should be okay. You shouldn't. I hate also when people have to be overly courteous and whatever. I don't like formalities much, but how can you criticize at one point and offending at the same time on someone's material when that can be anyone's? Like, I'm not even talking about Schwerpunkt at this point because, as I told you, never quite received such a great amount of contempt, but I've seen it happening. Like, and pretending that person is letting you do it. It is not blocking you, is not taking you away. That's also difficult to understand. And there are certain cases that probably are very, it's about really offending the other people. Like, it's not about helping them, but just targeting them for some reason. And I also just know that in case this happens, also with people like other members that comment, I won't put up with this. I won't tolerate it, because here everybody should respect each other, and it takes you definitely much more time to write something like comment. Doesn't matter how simple it is, than for me to delete it, right? So right, it's not worth it. We both lose time, and it's gonna bring anywhere. Instead, many people seemingly enjoy to do this, and these groups are the place where this happens a lot of times, and also with which expectation, because you see, YouTube, for example, is very anonymous in general. It's a place where people generally don't show their name, their face, whatever. Facebook is instead. So I think it's atrocious, the amount of horrible, of awful stuff that people can write, not just in groups, but in profiles and whatever, by themselves, like not even attacking actually other people, but letting certain comments or posts visible, right? And this can include even, I don't know, racism, or I don't know, something very heavy that even, okay, let's assume you're racist, but you don't go waving it like as if it was to the rest of the world on a public account, right? You would presumably at least be concerned that someone could start targeting you for as a consequence. Okay, many people don't care because they say, yeah, I just want to speak. Well, what's the deal, right? But it's still stupid. Like, it will create problems to you, not just because what you're writing is stupid, but also because you're evidently too stupid, even to understand that you should shut up maybe at one point, right? And instead, people are proud of this. Like, there is this sense of self-entitlement of being a jerk sometimes that I don't know, I think it corresponds to kind of unbalanced minds in part. I met this stuff rarely. I think I never interacted with any of these people, fortunately, in terms of arguments or debates, whatever. But you see that this happening all around. I mean, come on, how many times you've seen this stuff? It probably happens very often, right? There is probably a great, I don't know, sense of impunity, as if the internet was a place where nobody had responsibility, or it was just for having fun. But behind these behaviors, you also feel that these people are somewhat lonely, because what would you do that for? Just for showing it to others? But what you like? You probably want attention. Want to draw attention. That's an explanation, for example. And that's something personally never cared about, which could sound strange for someone that is making that is having a YouTube channel with videos and stuff. But it's not that I seek for your attention. Like, I'm here just speaking. If someone is interested, the better it is, right? But I don't go out there claiming like, oh, look, this is my super special channel, so you should come here. I don't really feel it's productive, right? Many people feel sometimes that somewhat that uh, these attitudes prove, I don't know, that their strength of character, the fact that these are usually people who share stuff like don't care about what others think of you, just go ahead for your life. Yeah, okay, but that's pretty stupid. Like, okay, because if you are stupid, you can't do that. People will always think you're dumb, and the only reason why you're doing this is that you're indirectly complaining about others misunderstanding you. And why are you so misunderstood? Maybe is it your fault that you are so? Because as we've seen, that's quite likely to happen. On Facebook groups, another thing I've learned is there is an anxiety of protagonism by certain standards. I think I share it in part because it's obvious that when I come here and speak, I should have a minimal ego to think that what I say has a meaning and an importance, that people are willing to listen to it at some point, which is something that embarrasses me terribly. Like, as I told you before, I started, to be honest, I started to speak like this on YouTube because most of the times in my life I needed to speak, but I had not many chances to do it with someone that could share this interest, etc. So I thought that a part of my day could be dedicated to this, and channeling in fact through this medium, so that at least other people would listen to the thing I need to say. But I don't think that's in fact an anxiety of protagonism. It's relatively having an opinion and thinking that it can be useful, as we were saying before, for someone, right? I'm sad that I'm talking about everything but Facebook groups proper and things that happen in there. What else can we say about them? I met another beauty of Facebook. Why I got tired of them? Well, this is a bit more complicated. Well, as I was saying before, when I began, I did it mostly for sharing stuff that I thought were important, etc. And I felt a prejudice. I felt a prejudice towards basically everything that is posted out there. We all fall regularly victims and actually enactors of prejudices. Like we do live in part even for prejudices as well, because everything we do is somewhat presuming something that we think to know that will happen or that we expect in some way. And this prejudice is a little bit is the engine of the whole. It's the fuel of the whole system, let's say. Because if you had why do you have something to say in the first place? But probably because you think that either you are misunderstood or at least people don't understand something about the world, etc. After all, the reason why Schwerpunkt is here is exactly that. We think that there is that there is something that could be added to our culture in terms of historical awareness. So Schwerpunkt is in part here for fighting against the prejudice, right? The prejudice towards, and if you're a regular follower, you know that I have anti-technologistic beliefs in part, and I would like things to get a bit better to dispel myths about, I don't know, the Middle Ages as a dark era or something like that, or these are simple and banal, but the thing is actually deeper, as we also understand mostly from the Phone Closets playlist. So when you're out there posting and saying things, it's as if there was a trial, right? And the thing you said were passed under examination, were examined, were observed, people were exposed and responded to them. So this exercise is amazingly useful because it teaches you to escape criticism, because criticism hurts at that point. And most of the times it is fair criticism, or at least it is motivated by something you could do something about in turn. So this is a great exercise to refine your information at a point that people don't have to, like, information can even be provocative by certain standards. Probably one of the greatest exercises at that point is not just sharing for the sake of it. Like, there are people in these groups that are, I don't know, pretty either lonely or bored, and they just share stuff either from other pages, other side. They never write something meaningful on their own. Maybe they do it because they think, I don't know, there is a value in sharing, that more stuff will be known one day, so maybe that's still a way to expose people to some information. But you understand that some of it is just passive, and attitude towards knowledge in itself. It's just a way to apparently participate in having this face, this outward look of, oh, look at this person participating, is exposing him or herself. This also helps. Like, a reason why we go out there, I remember, was technically, even if it was kind of far from it, but in practice, but I don't know, you hoped you would meet, I don't know, a girl that would say, look to you and say, oh, look at this boy, you're kind of nice, he knows this stuff. I stopped over time because it didn't work. I had to take other measures for that. But it was still a way to, in fact, to build your self-confidence at that point, because all you were doing was trying at the beginning. And you were trying because you inherently didn't know whether it would go well or not. And thought-provoking information is important as well, because if you're clever, you can find topics that normally people would, that they would criticize. Like, this is also another thing I do on Schwerpunkt every once in a while. They start talking about stuff that is, not controversial in the essence or in the context, that I always try to keep as neutral as possible, of course, if anything for historical accuracy, but something that is very provocative in terms of, this is a time in history that, in fact, is hotly debated. How many times we talked about the Crusades, for example, and this doesn't, as you know, I have a pretty, I don't think peculiar, but somewhat neutral approach to certain issues of the Crusade. I don't use the Crusades to weaponize history and to use it for political or religious. I don't care fundamentally, and that's why I want to tell this story. But I already know that if I post something about it, chances are higher for me to get criticized in some way. That's pretty interesting to notice anyway, that you by sharing also all this stuff on Facebook groups like I do, because you know that probably some of you actually found me via Facebook groups, because I have like 40 history groups, and sometimes to get more views and to make the channel grow faster, I share all of this 40, of course, if the topic is fitting, and as you know, it's simply a share that I don't say anything. Like, I don't want to sponsor myself more than that, because I do it just because it's for free and I cannot spend time, so it's okay. The groups are made for sharing, it's not a big deal. But I hate self-promotion in itself. I never pretend that I am here because I'm somewhat better than the others, or that I have to be superior to my to others. I don't care. Of course, I'm very critical sometimes, but my criticism remains confined to a general problem that objectively has some issues that we can all agree that they're important to solve, and that's kind of common sense, right? Not much more than that. But sometimes I have fun, because there is always a sense of malice deep inside that we have as original sin is there. We are inspired by the devil every once in a while, but that's also important in the sense that you start daring, you start risking, but you also can learn more from that. In fact, also it's actually also a religious lesson that paradoxically the sinner that gets redempted because of course of punishment, is a kind of better person than the person that has always believed and has never done anything wrong, right? The Bible is, there are famous examples of this, and that's actually a very in-depth psychological realization. We know, scientifically speaking, that that's exactly how the thing works, right? So the interesting thing of it is that you can, by sharing in all these groups, you can immediately feel what are the topics that can create more malaise, more controversy, right? And paradoxically, these are also the ones that attract more information. That's I find it particularly important in perspective, because it's as if the people craved for this this drama, and they wanted to fuel it indirectly, or at least, or to have something, to find people to actually discuss or even argue about, so that they can get kind of in the heat of this action, because it's as if there were topics now that were silenced or that nobody would really like to touch. Recently, actually, it was in November, I was noticing something that I think at this point I haven't experienced anymore on Facebook, but basically there were, that Facebook has certain automatic algorithms for which the maybe certain titles of certain reports or whatever, they start telling you, you shouldn't be posting so much, and I noticed that I got some very strange, I should have made a video about that, but some very strange reports every time I posted, but I don't think they were actually from the groups, or that someone signaled me. I think it was Facebook in itself. That's why it was quite worrying. That I had made videos, for example, about, I don't know, there was history of Christianity, that, or Islamic history, that, of course, talking about medieval history, I have a pretty hefty playlist of medieval Christianity, of medieval Islam, and I deal with this topic. And every time there was this name, like Christianity, Pope, Caliphate, Islam, whatever, Facebook sent me like very ambiguous and actually actually it was not a sanction, right? But it simply said, with an internal notification, no, this thing can't be said, like, or not like this, but like this post is against our guidelines or something like that. But it was nothing about, like, I wasn't prevented for posting further. I wasn't blocked. I wasn't anything. But I noticed that this happened exclusively when, for example, I had these words inserted in the title. I mean, it's as if Facebook had and I maybe you think that I'm being kind of vague to stress my point, but actually I would have to show you the notification, because it was actually pretty weird. It was literally like this, that we're starting to say that this specific topic, this specific name wasn't kind of allowed, which was pretty amazing. And I found also many groups, Facebook groups, that they don't and by the way, I don't participate to these groups. I'm there just to share. Like, I never interact, like, unless someone poses me a question. Well, in that case, but it almost never happens. And in that certain topics, like, didn't want to hear anything of religion, for example, I made a video. At one point, it was the sacralization of the Merovingian monarchy. That was actually pretty interesting. It was, I don't know if you've listened to it, but it was basically about analyzing the literature of Merovingian Gaul at the time of Clovis and his successors, like stressing all the regality and of Christ and the Militia Christi in comparison to the warlike Frankish military culture. I mean, it was very, very interesting. There was also a lot of pagan history in it, and not just Christian one. And basically, some people went nuts. They started saying, this is history of Christianity. We don't care about Christianity. They immediately started saying, this is all about Christianity's fairy tales. That was a history about the institutional culture of Merovingian Francia. that wasn't about history or religion, preaching or religion. I mean, I'm positive also about the fact that someone mistook Clovis in the picture for Christ or something like that, because there is sometimes in these groups, in these large numbers of agglomerations, let's say, of people, this kind of big sense of frustration, of insatisfaction, of hatred, of conflictuality, right? And I noticed that, by the way, in strictly history groups, because this criticism was coming mostly from generalistic groups, because I pass also into things like general knowledge, amazing facts. It can be literally about everything. Like in history groups, people are very kind of, I mean, they tend on average to be kind of more intelligent, or at least they keep things for themselves, because they realize that history is somewhat complex and that they may say something kind of dumb in misjudging. But there is sometimes hidden, a concealed hatred that is very disturbing, that you hear it, you feel as if it was just behind the corner ready to burst, and investing everybody was in front of it. And you don't quite understand, because you also realize that other people are instead actually quite positive about certain contents, about certain ideas. But that's an example, for example, of kind of controversial topic. That is controversial. Why? Because it's essentially talking about I don't know, history of Christianity, for example, from a non kind of spiritual I mean, not because, I don't know, there are channels, for example, on YouTube that are from pastoral communities that make history about, I don't know, the various saints, the various orders, and that's obviously a history told by Christians, for their needs of spirituality. I mean, there is nothing wrong. I as you know, I never actually even explicitated what my actual spiritual beliefs are, which I do have, and I have an enormous actually respect and sympathy for. I don't have problems with religions in general, and I have problems with single people, which is a very different thing, and this depends what they say, right? So, but let's say these topics somewhat help to refine what you have to say and how you have to present them, and to let's say to grow on that base, right? And sometimes I was aggressed. It happened a very few times. I had I don't even remember. Actually, I remember only once that my entire videos was completely misunderstood, like at this levels, more or less, that I was talking, I don't know, about the partition of Carolingian Europe, and I was accused of racism because allegedly I said something that they obviously didn't specify, because it was wrong, because there was nothing about that in the video. That I don't know, that I was talking about the origin of medieval France or medieval Germany in kind of strange terms. I don't know what, but you know that I follow actually, mainstream academic historiography. I mean, I don't have any. I don't make, and I think a reason why you follow me is that I don't care about that stuff. It's far from me. Of course, I do. For example, I do have my bias when it comes to certain topics that are kind of repressed. You know that we talk a lot about certain religious perspectives that we have lost, maybe in an Indo-European perspective, that there are that, for example, I found when I was kind of old at this point, and I started getting interested in it because they're actually very important. They're stuff that in fact is taught in mainstream anthropology, history of religions worldwide, and you can't find some of the greatest names of this disciplines actually dealing with this topics today, and obviously nobody accuses them of being controversial, but many people feel the need to find an imaginary enemy, right? I must confess that today I made this video because I wanted to do it since a lot, like in the last days I told you even I wanted to do this, but today I was sharing something on that only Facebook group I was talking to you before. It was a person that didn't like me, and I realized didn't like me because never liked my posts, but always people who commented on them, and often in contrast with what I was saying. Even if they weren't objectively very right, and they were of the most varied topics. So I realized that this person didn't like me, and today I posted an article that was very old, like was 26 years old or something like that, from an internet site. It has a web platform for sites for that I had that you can create your own site on, and this person basically said that this this platform, like, it was literally a platform. It's as if you go on those sites that allow you to create your own site, right? And said that this platform was of fake news, but that was even a platform that makes news. That was a platform where people create their own sites and then they write their own blog, whatever they do. This person mistook a website free share platform for a fake news stuff that, by the way, was an extremely innocent topic on the Notizia Dignitatum of the late Roman Empire. I mean, there was nothing controversial about this. It went nuts and started saying, this is rubbish. And there are people in the group said, what the hell are you talking about? This is like free stuff, there is nothing controversial in the article that had neither read, because I said, I don't read the stuff, it comes from this platform, but it's a free sharing platform on webs for bloggers. And it was, that's where people get hysterical and nuts for things that unitly that they have matured on their own, like crazy. I don't know what was there exactly actually about this person, and that's a proof that how sometimes even an accusation, like being accused of these, for example, accusing person of spreading fake news. Like, basically every person who has something against another accuses that person that what he's telling is lies. Everything is lies. Things are not lies. The information is beautiful because when you have it, you can tear it down if it's wrong. You can appreciate it when it's valuable. When you start saying, I don't want to know anything about you, and you start even inventing that you are some kind of monster without even having listened to you, something that happens sometimes with my videos as well, although it was my very mild criticism, wasn't a big deal, is that from the type of of stuff that was being written in the comment, I realized that those people had stopped like to the first 5 minutes of like 2 hours long videos, right? And as you know, probably if you're a regular follower, most of my videos are they have actually a very long introduction, which is aimed at, in fact, exactly at paving the path for what I will say towards the middle part and the final part, because it's important to frame this logic, this information, in a way you can't equivocate that. Because if I started talking without premises, the things that I say that are usually fairly complicated would be sometimes misunderstood, and even when another thing, what happens is when people tend to criticize slight words or definitions as invalidating everything you say. Like a typical thing, for example, is when you use the term Byzantine, right? I found people, albeit few, that usually are people who have that mindset at their first or second year of university when they first acquainted with Byzantine history, that say that if you say Byzantine, you're basically an idiot because you don't know anything about them, because their true name was the Eastern Romans. Like, aside from the fact that these people don't seem to know most of the times that there was no Eastern Roman Empire, if not for a couple of centuries, and after which basically that thing reverted into a single Roman Empire. So talking about Eastern Roman Empire for, I don't know, the 11th century Byzantine Empire is idiotic, because there is nothing like an Eastern Roman Empire and a Western Roman Empire, like, unless you consider the Holy Roman Empire as the West. But in that sense, legalistically speaking, it wasn't. Even though, as you know, I appreciate also the Holy Roman Empire, and I try to, in fact, to give its due, compared also to extra fanatism from the other side. But you can't say that in front of for example, a channel like mine that has dedicated, I don't know, 14 videos or more about that are like 2 hours each about Byzantine history, and saying, no, you can't use you don't know the term Byzantine, therefore this invalidates everything you say about that. I should make a video, for example, about why I use the term Byzantine. Thanks my eyes that they weren't called Byzantines, that they were actually called Romans. On the contrary, you will find also people, of course, that will say, no, these were Byzantines because the true Romans were before, and these were something different, right? So you can always find knots like that will make you pretty confused sometimes, because sometimes people criticize. And another thing that happens, actually, especially when you are kind of aware about the complexity of history, is that especially when you're acquainted with an information that you hear for the first time, is, but that you immediately understand it is kind of unreliable, because also the way it's presented is kind of idiotic or whatever. But you start saying, well, but where this person has drawn this from, like, where has it written? Like, did it invent it itself? Did it read it somewhere? I mean, you're acquainted with a series of cases that help you also to refine your awareness on human psychology, right? Because this exercise is dramatically useful when you meet someone that you even couldn't conceive could say certain things. At that point, it's kind of entertaining as well. I must say that there is a component of of amusement as well, because sometimes you start saying, well, how could they even conceive something like that? But they do exist. Like, and I realize I'm not satisfying you at all with this video, because it's revolving around certain single issues. It never kind of gets to the end. We were arrived at the point I started refining myself on Facebook groups. Like, at the point I started objectively posting very high quality stuff, and I can say that because normally when I write, I say more meaningful things than when I speak. Not always, but at least on average. And certain things, no, aside from that, I had documented myself, used books, kind of a very proper way, and I started talking about interesting stuff. When you realize that nobody cares, like, they even treat you like, let's be honest about it. I started posting on a group that was about my country history. I also never liked these things like, I don't know, I come from one country, therefore I must know my history better than you do. No, I don't believe that is true. Of course, there are things that everybody coming from one country kind of knows better about that country than someone else, but this doesn't make you a better historian about your own country than someone else that had actually studied it professionally, and whatever. But that was a kind of a cozy, nice place that I wanted to share stuff with, because I thought it was interesting. Like, I wanted to just to kill the time with, and I didn't have any greater intention, but I took satisfaction with it, and I started writing this complex stuff, right? And I can say it without modesty, I was outsmarting everyone, but believe me, I never say these things because I think I'm actually smart. But the fact is that what was posted there was so cheap and so flat and so stereotypical and so superficial that I started realizing, and nobody cared. Like, it was self-evident. What was writing there was kind of research, elaborated, reliable, kind of innovative, because they were saying things nobody had heard of, but not seemingly nobody cared more than much, right? It was also nothing about self-promotion of my country or whatever. I'm pretty neutral and impartial. I don't care. I give my country its due, whether it was positive or negative. I don't give a damn. I try to be historically accurate first and foremost. And I thought the stuff was interesting. If I were to speak about that stuff now, probably you would appreciate it, because it's more or less the same level of information sometimes I provide with in these videos, and it's basically the same type of topics, right? But I realized nobody cared. The people went on sharing stuff about. I remember there was I participated to several groups though. There was one about Roman history, for example. That I remember it was so weird, because they were talking about Latin, right, and how it was pronounced, or at least how we think it was pronounced, because we don't know. It's another topic that some of you has asked me to discuss. Still haven't done it, and I confess it because I didn't find yet a decent Latin grammar with phonetics that with the difference in classical and ecclesiastical pronunciation that I could use profitably for making a sketch for the video, which is that theoretically I should make this video right now, because as you know, I normally speak either, if we're talking about ancient Rome, I usually use the classical pronunciation. I've talked about Middle Ages, I speak in ecclesiastical pronunciation. And these people were wondering, there are certain topics like that. For example, Roman history is not discussed normally, like it was the history any other country or something like that. It's normally discussed in terms of that everybody has an opinion about it, because it's so great and cool that everybody thinks that they know about that. Most people's interest revolves actually around the early empire, stereotypically. There's also another huge attention that fortunately has arisen towards kind of the late antique and kind of Byzantine period, but it's I don't know, it could be better. Of course everything could be better, but let's say people lack, for example, a lot about Republican times, even early Roman times, that are very interesting, telling you the truth, and very complex to understand, because also they don't fit all the cliches and misunderstandings that revolve around Rome, the Roman Empire, that you usually hear in its most iconic and stereotypical way. And everybody's an expert, right? And these two guys, one of which didn't like me particularly, and I suppose because never appreciated also in there the stuff I wrote, because it was kind of I was doing basically the same thing with before, like intervening in that, more than posting, actually intervening in debates and questions and providing with pretty spot on information, because simply I have my books and I know how to read them, right? So differently from others. That it, once again, I'm not trying to act smart. It's just at one point you're capable of doing it. You do it, and you're able to understand where the hierarchy stands. And these two people were discussing about the fact that according to them, Latin. One of them was wondering what Latin kind of sound like. I remember they were discussing Cicero's name, right? And according to this guy, it's actually the actual pronunciation should have been something like Kikiro, right? While it's Cicero, right? In classical pronunciation, as far as we know. And another guy commented, and actually the first guy was asking whether it was right, and the second guy answered, but these were also kind of middle-aged men, like they weren't boys or guys you can say waste time with kids. No, they were actually mature adult people, older than me, of course. And this other guy arrived and said, as far as I remember from my Latin stuff, he didn't actually say something like that. As far as I remember, Latin had all long vowels, right? As if, and so that's it. And at that point, I modestly intervened, saying what you normally learn at the very first lesson of Latin when you study it, that is that Latin has renowningly two quantities, so-called like that. This is in fact the short vowel and the long vowel accents, right? Like and for example, and this is what literally the whole Latin literature and metrics is based on since ever, and that's why it rhymes, and it's the only way you can understand Latin literature in the first place. It's history. There is an immense studies, philology, literature, linguistics, all about this. So this person and pretended that they were just long vowels, like which I don't think this is. There's at least no Indo-European language that ever sounds anything like. I don't think there's even no any language in the world that actually sounds like that. And I said, but of course there were like both short and long vowels in Latin, and nobody cared. Like they didn't even answer, they didn't say anything, because they were debating actually for very long about this. Not very long, just two, but they were asking for further information. I provided them because I explained how the thing is, why matrix functions the way it does, why linguistically that is the case. Nobody cared. At that point, when you start to provide information, and these people, of course, would appreciate something else, like whatever it was, like even cheap stuff that maybe nobody cared about, memes, jokes, whatever. This was one actually of the very few accurate researched information that I provided, and nobody cared. So at that point, that was just an example, but at other points I realized that what I was doing there was useless, right? When you have achieved a certain level of confidence with certain topics, and you actually know what you're talking about, and you can confirm that with literature, with studies, with bibliography, and with sources, and that's what exactly a historian does, right? Excuse me, I drink a little. Excuse me. You don't feel the need anymore to share that stuff, right? Or at least to seek for attention in that way, or thinking that your time should be about it. So that's the time which I decided, actually after several years that I did that for entertainment. I also met a lot of interesting people in that way that loved history, and we had kind of similar interests, and I'm very thankful for that, for all over the world, by the way, which was also a great experience in that sense. And yet I decided I stop, because this is not worth it anymore, right? One thing is like the group that I still am in, and I post in, like with fair, just for seeking further information from people that actually know more than me, because I care about this, and I care about professionalism, etc. And I believe in authority. I believe there are people that are more reliable, they're more interesting, that should be listened to, that have a real experience, right? And that's also a quick and easy way to kind of get more information, at least if anything, to integrate more information to the one you already have, to fill the gaps, or asking for confirmation about what you were thinking. And the interesting stuff is that I do it already having my own opinion and actually having my own beliefs. I arrived at this point of my life in which I'm starting even to freak out about myself, because I'm starting to have certain fixed beliefs that scare me, not because they are wrong, because they test reality and they turn out to be wrong, because they test reality and they turn out to be right? And I'm starting to become too overly confident about them, because as long as they work, it's kind of easy and cheap and convenient to rely on them as long as they work, right? And this serves me to, however, still remaining alive mentally, intellectually, and saying, okay, maybe there is someone in there that has still yet another view about it. And I'm very critical. I'm very critical of people who comment of post, even if I don't react, and I try always to be nice and courteous and polite. But sometimes I also feel like I'm dealing with someone that still needs to take off, right? Not that it's necessarily less competent than me, but maybe hasn't gotten to the point I need. And that, for example, I don't have a huge. I must confess it. I met a lot of professors on these Facebook groups, by the way. I mean, okay, not excessively many, but still enough to like to realize what they are. And I'm, as you know, I'm working to become, you know, if not a professor, at least an equal to. I don't know how to put like this. Like, in I don't have many other options currently, and I'm working for it. So I don't care about being a professor or teaching someone. I think the only thing I actually would like to start doing, and if I'll be lucky from next year we start doing, is examining students at university. It must be annoying and terrible, but at least you can start, you know, I don't know how you say that in English, but not, you know, not making them pass the exam if they don't know enough. That would be extremely funny. That starts you become an assistant or something. But I don't have an enormous opinion of professors, because most of the times I met kind of two types. There is the well, it's difficult to categorize because I don't want to sound a bit too cliche, like, but there are two types. Let's put it in this way. The first one is someone who objectively has his own competence and knows his deal and whatever, but that is maybe on Facebook because they want to share, like, to become more famous. This is apparently becoming a thing, right? You know, professors as public figures with fame and authority and a lot of followers on social media, and this is becoming something, and I don't fully like that. Like, I would like myself, for example, to be appreciated for my authority, but I don't feel the need to have like a herd of followers just for saying, like, now I have so many. Like, on Schwerpunkt I do it because that can produce some advantage in concrete terms, but I mean, as you know, I appreciate you, but I don't think that you are I mean, that you are like objects in my hands just for achieving who knows what. Like, I don't crave for you to be like 100 or 1 million. Like, that's not the important aspect for me. The important aspect for me is that you maybe can learn something from it in turn, and in turn can provide me with the support that I need, maybe to get to somewhere, or to expand my net of opportunities or something like that. That's essentially how it is. So professors that kind of do that just for appearing authoritative, like kind of a middle-aged people, you know, mature, kind of elderly ones that, you know, I don't know why they do that. They see even this social media as something like a contact with the youth, or I don't know. It's too. I don't like that. I don't know. I should arrive to that age to judge their attitude. Then there is another group that is less pleasant. This is about professors that actually come from a certain area of the world, whose academic traditions I don't like at all, because I think that the quality of academic work is collapsing right now there, and it's getting extremely political. And I think that there is this shared attitude of having a title, like a teaching, you know, the university, or having or having a PhD, as a matter of fact, because, you know, that's how you can teach a university, but you can even just a PhD, that, or having just a degree in history. Like, it's not just about professors. People who feel somewhat competent about a certain field just because they have a degree or a title, As you know, I could boast something myself, but I don't do it because I don't care. Like, I'm here just like I could be when I was a teenager, when I like to talk about history and whatever. Like, I don't care that I have a title that says that I'm a historian, right? I don't come here saying, you should listen to me because I'm cool and special because I actually studied history. And there are a lot of people who are hysterical about it. They think they're so cool and beautiful, and they're so wise, and they can say something so disgusting that I would take away their titles from them for. Like, there are many aspects about even politics, like how certain times these figures think that history is mostly about political action, right? I'm the first one who says that, of course, if you study history well, you should be kind of a better person, better citizen, right? But many people see history as leaning from a certain particular side and needing to back it with an active political bias, right? I remember once I was criticized by a teacher, a professor actually, that said that it was that time that it was accused of saying kind of racial things. I don't remember, but I can assure you, I can't give you even the title of the videos because there are the few videos I made about I think they were actually about the partition of Carolingian Europe, right? So if you want to go search for racist stuff, look there. You won't find them because I can assure you that I don't say them, and the content is public, is open there, and everybody can see it, and nobody ever told me anything like that, not even once. And given that I have shared this stuff, I got 100,000 views now the other day. I've shared this stuff in like tens of groups every day for months and months. That is makes hundreds of videos shared in front of surely more than millions of people, and the only single time someone ever accused me of anything at that point, telling the truth, because that was the only real criticism too, was that I think I take it statistically speaking as that my channel is faring pretty well. It is possibly one of the furthest thing from racist contents that you could ever possibly find everywhere, right? So statistically speaking, I'm doing pretty well. But I remember that on that occasion, that professor said something like, because to be honest, I said on another, because, well, it started getting complicated. That was the video on the Carolingian Empire was another one that the administrator of that group brought up, because it said that she had sensed that I had said that thing, that racially oriented. She didn't specify which thing it was, by the way, telling the truth either, because it was not true, by the way, and the liar knew it perfectly. But then it was criticizing actually a video I made on the Crusades, in which I said something similar to today. It is exactly that I care about historical accuracy and not political correctness, so that when I made history videos, I don't care about what perspectives people have politically. I make history, and that's something very different, right? That was literally what it was. And you know that also, that video on the Crusade, it was, I can't even tell you which it was, because I want to be as clean and transparent as I can be to prove that I know that I'm actually right? Because you can't see the video. That's the checking proof. The video was at the origins of the Crusades for a perspective. There was actually an insightful video that even another professor, a PhD, and actually that writes articles that I even quoted on, appreciated very much, that understood that there was actually nothing wrong with it, and it was actually shedding kind of awareness about what we think Crusades like, and why there is so much conflictuality about these topics, and why we should have a kind of a more neutral view of it. Well, on that occasion, there was instead this other professor that hadn't watched the video because it had already been removed by the administrator, so these people were talking completely out of the blue. And this professor simply said something, if I am a professor from, I don't say where, because otherwise you think I'm biased. Um, that I'm a professor here, and I've taught for like 12 years in this college in this place, and I can say all I can say is that every person who has a political agenda shouldn't be making history, right? And it was referred actually against me, because initially when I read that, I said, "Oh, finally something who got that." Instead, I realized that this person was referring to me. That is, a person who is inherently against, like criticizing, like putting forward actually historical accuracy to political correctness is actually having a political bias. Like, how is that possible? Like, you know, political correctness means having a political bias, because you're essentially enforcing a totalitarian ideal for which there is a political correctness. That is, there is an absolute political truth that you need to impose on others, right? Whichever it is, I don't care whether it's left or right. I don't care, and therefore, you should compel with it. Like, and this guy was writing basically that a person who abstains, who goes against this view, has a political bias. And in the video, for example, just to tell you how people can easily twist content, I was saying that, I value historical accuracy, then I don't care about political correctness. Simple statement. The video is there, you can listen to it. There is nothing minimally controversial in terms of political correctness either. But seemingly there are lots of videos out there that talk about the Crusades in terms of like either the Christians or the Muslims were the good or bad people, in depending all the various combinations you want to find. You finally find a video like mine that doesn't give a shit about this garbage, and you say, well, this is politically BS'd, simply because I stated that, and that's terrible. Like, that's exactly a proof of how difficult it is at that point. You know what happened? Because I never told you this story. I was blocked by the group because I basically asked for explanations. Like I said, where did I say this? Can you tell me which video it was? Because I told you that it was the Carolingian split, the split of the Carolingian Empire, but not even sure about it, because I can tell you because it was the only one that resembled the description that this person was referring to a video, but didn't even mention which video it was, telling you the truth, to be fully honest. And basically the administrator even said that that she had noticed this like once and hadn't said anything, while the group guidelines said, that you had 3 warnings if you did something wrong. You had to be warned yourself 3 times, and then after which you would be blocked and expelled. So basically, she had noticed, but she hadn't told anything, and that counted as a warning, even if I hadn't received anyone. This was the second warning, and which meant that if I said anything against that, or just asking for an explanation like I did, I would be blocked. Right? Even she didn't even say that. She simply said that. A third warning, I would be blocked. I posted in that group making the screenshot of that report and saying, I received this, can you tell me please which video it is, why you're saying, what is the content that I was blocked. And lots of people, there was a kind of an internal rebellion. I don't know if any of you was from that group, because people started noticing what they had done to me, this person actually specifically, and they started kind of even be, and that's where they get idiotic, they even insulting that person. And I didn't do it, but eventually people understood what was going on, and they insulted this person. So you can understand, this is a very good example actually about how how information can be messed up, how you can be misunderstood, how you can be taken out without any warning. Like it's kind of difficult to even to cope with these attitudes, because I didn't care much about that group. I mean, it was an average medieval history group that, like, 95% of groups is about historical memes, and I was actually the only person posting the content I post here normally, so kind of serious topics at least. And I was dealt with that. So it's as if, there was a need for control in making people more stupid. What I would like to do through my videos, making people more aware, more intelligent, more autonomous. Like, you know that I don't indoctrinate you. I don't say you, look, this is the only view of history you should have, otherwise you're out. Like, what I always do when I make a video is I always leave you with the idea, be like reason, like just know that reality is extremely complex, and so not things like always, someone is tricking you, or no, that you should be work hard in order to understand what happens, and it doesn't happen. There is it doesn't happen elsewhere. People seem to get dumber. When you get in these historical groups, the first feeling you start getting is people are too stupid for me to be here. That's why I stopped participating to those groups and just shared these things, because someone that is there, that is intelligent actually, because there are intelligent people, of course there are, but the majority of the content seems to be completely different. And I know it's difficult now, the video is very long to expand further, but just for saying even that there is a section of actually reasonable people. Like, I think there is a silent majority, and this is at least what I want to think, because otherwise I would lose faith towards humanity, that actually works well, that makes this world work, and that doesn't say much, doesn't complain, because it's wise enough to be kind of out of the discussion, to be relatively detached for certain time, and it also has something more important to think about. But at the same time, that the majority probably is not that aware either about certain time, and that's why I would like to address that majority and saying, look, you can learn. Like, that all the things I say in here is you can learn history on your own. You don't have to be listening to me right now to understand certain things. I can't help you, I can give you an advice, but you are the one who has the power and the ability and the intelligence that we all have to understand more the reality we live in. So I can't tell you what you have to do, what you don't have to do. I'm just telling you how it was for me and what you can find when you're ahead in these times, and what can lead you towards maybe a better understanding about, though, something that you have to decide what it is, and that you still have to make all the effort to achieve, right? I don't know whether these videos are meaningful, because not even today I really said all what I wanted to say, or these videos are pretty confused, because it's just a stream of consciousness. Like, speaking about these issues is not easy. Like, you should make a case for everything that you say and start making a list of actual examples, things that happened. But I prefer sometimes to speak like this, and I suspected most of you don't like this, because once again, as I was saying before, you would have wished me to talk about Hellenic influence in Roman helmets, which is what I should have been talking about today, but I preferred, because I didn't have enough time to prepare the video, to do it tomorrow now. But I think these topics also have their own importance, that there is an enormous amount of potential into the understanding of this system. It can really make an enormous impact, even just about thinking at how we behave before than things we are searching for. Because at the end of the day, most things we do are not really carefully reasoned. Like we do things because we are, and that's why we clash, for example, in certain debates, and that's why we sometimes we said, okay, we should be more disciplined, etc., etc., and then we are not disciplined, because at that point we lose the temper, we screw up, we start arguing and debating in a kind of a wild fashion, and we lose the plot, right? And it's dangerous and a mistake. So maybe I should make an entire video to explain how to be disciplined during a debate, and which is probably also in there. You should pass through this stuff in order to understand them, because even advice is good as long as someone already knows it, can identify it as accurate, right? Which means that you should have passed through it yourself already, which we all do in by a certain degree, but also by other standards we remain stuck into ourselves. Like we don't know what very complicated topics, but for now I think it's better we stop it here. What else can I say now? Well, nothing. I thought I could make a video on other topics like bullying, how to cope with bullying, for example. I find it interesting because I was not particularly bullied in school. I didn't have this much of these problems actually. Also in there, I'm a bit of a typical in that sense, because people who make videos about bullying generally is people that have been bullied, and I suspect that in certain cases they're not very lucid about it. So I think maybe a kind of a more moderate perspective can even help people to be more realistic about bullying, and I thought I could discuss it because it's essentially about a conflict, like about a war, open warfare sometimes as well. And I think it can be useful in part, and I have my own opinion on these issues. It could be useful, but also I wouldn't like to have too much responsibility of maybe a kid staying in school that listens to me and thinks that I have all the solution for this. I don't. But even for parents, this could be useful, and therefore I plan to expand a little bit on these topics. You have to forgive me if, once again, I today talked about this. I have a lot to do, telling the truth, and this actually took me longer than the average video, but it kind of saved a bit of time in terms of preparation of video, because I'm working kind of hard every day, and this is a bit of a moment of venting. The only one I have for actually making the point of the situation psychologically, emotionally, and I never talk about my work with you, what I actually do, and what it takes, and that's also another interesting topic of conversation. But if you if you even ever arrive to this point of the video, please let me know if you're interested in this kind of alternative topics, like for just a little break, and this channel will remain about history and military history, but these other topics, albeit apparently unrelated, I think can help overall, can offer another a bit of depth to this channel, which could be useful even for approaching a larger audience and whatever. But alright, for now we stop it here. I hope I didn't bore you excessively, and let's see if tomorrow I'm able to do this video about Roman helmets, Hellenized Roman helmets. And for now, I just hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please share it. Otherwise, leave a like or subscribe to my channel if you're interested in my upcoming contents. And for now, I thank you heartily for listening to me. I wish you a nice time and see you next time. Bye.